get beyond the shame and you get beyond, I have to quit because I want to be seen a certain way.
Yeah.
Then you get to the real trauma that drives the addiction. And I think that's how you heal. Stop ignoring suffering. We hide our suffering in so many different ways. Like this whole thing about trying to be a good boy. We're hiding our suffering in that. That looks like a good thing that we're trying to do in the world, but we're suffering. Having to constantly think that you're good in the eyes of people. That's all I have to say about it, is that it's nice to have people out there who don't think so highly of me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Enheartened. Today, I am pleased to be sitting with, I want to say, one of the modern pioneers in these times that we're navigating when it comes to really, I want to say, dissolve emotional repression as a way to finding true freedom. That's how I relate to Scott's work. And, I found Scott like many years ago on Facebook initially. And I don't know, his teachings were just striking. And he was cutting through a lot of the noise, a lot of the noise that had to do with like enlightenment as a way to run away from the human condition. And I found that really refreshing. And that's the reason why, I had that in the back of my head of someday I would love to talk to this guy. And it is happening right now. Scott is, I don't even know where I should begin, a specialist in dealing with emotional repression. He has pioneered a methodology that really aims at doing that, called Kiloby Inquiries. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're also going to organically follow where the conversation wants to bring us, because I feel like this is going to be an organic conversation. Scott, thank you so much for being on the show. I am excited for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
That's awesome. Well, when I started researching a little bit about you, I saw that you had written 7 books, and I'm just going to read some of the titles there. And I have a question that comes after that. So the most recent one that I found was Awake but Sick: The Myth of Immediate Freedom and the Dangers of Spiritual Seeking and Finding. And I found that so striking, especially during these times. A few others like Natural Rest for Addiction. I think you also have an addiction recovery center called Natural Rest. I'm not sure. I think I saw that as well there. Living Relationship, Finding Harmony with Others. That's another title. Living Realization, a simple, plain English guide to nonduality. I'm a sucker for nonduality as well. So many other different titles. Where I'm going with this is there is a passionate devotion that you have about this work, because it's not just a hobby when somebody writes 7 books. I just went through the process of writing one, and it took me 2 years. It kicked my ass. It showed me some of my darkest shadows. So I'm just wondering, where's your devotion for this work coming from?
That's a good question, actually, because I don't always have that creative devotion. It actually depends on how well I'm doing. And so when I first had my non-dual awakening, there was a flow there. I wrote one book a book a year for 7 years is what it was. So there wasn't a lot of stress, or it wasn't a challenge. It was like it just came out of me. And then it stopped. The book writing just stopped. And at about the same time it stopped, I started to get sick, actually, from what I think is the repression. So what I missed on my spiritual path started to affect me and started to manifest as diseases and things at about the same time that I finished writing the 7th book. So it was perfect timing. There was a really powerful experience for me, like a non-dual shift, but it just wasn't fully embodied. And as you probably know, anger repression remained for me. So I wrote all those books without knowing I had the buried anger.
Yeah.
It was all very true and real for me, but it wasn't until I got to the buried anger that I saw where my suffering was coming from. That's the gift that gave me. And the last book is the one on repression. It's such a different title. It's like Awake but Sick. after all those titles, those very spiritual titles, it was all true for me. But there's a massive bypass in it, and you can hear it in the titles that I have all
Yeah.
these spiritual sounding titles and awake again, all true. But then here the last one says, "I'm awake, but I'm sick." And
Yes.
it's like being both. At one point, it was both because there was still the awakeness, still the experience, and also getting sick. That's why that last book has such an ominous title compared to the earlier version, the other books.
Oh, that's awesome. It's like now my curiosity is going in a million directions at the same time because just like you, I can relate to a phase of my journey where I was just solely interested in being bright, meaning I wanted to create the things, wanted to create the business, wanted to do the speaking, I just wanted to be bright, was mostly concerned with that, shining brighter. And then I felt like there was a natural moment of disillusionment where I realized there's something else here that wants to be seen that I don't know how to see yet. Do you think it's a natural evolution of the journey of maybe awakening to have a moment where maybe the body or the unconscious mind, the shadow will say, "Hey, I am here too, and until you see me fully, you will stay in this state of awake sickness, awake suffering."
Yes. And I was going to say, sometimes it's not so polite in the way that it does it.
Mm,
It's often like for me, um, I was teaching just like you and me. I'm sitting in a Zoom call with people, back then I was doing 4 or 5 a day, which is a lot more than I do now. I was overextending myself as part of the anger repression and
yeah.
probably burnt out too. But I was just sitting there working with somebody in the middle of the afternoon and I actually heard my spine, my nervous system say, stop. It's almost like the voice came from here. It wasn't my voice and it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't my thoughts, but I literally stopped working right then for a month because it was like, that was telling me that was a louder voice than anything I'd ever heard. It was so weird because I could feel it as pain, but it was like the pain was saying stop.
Mm-hmm.
Formed into that. That's all I heard. And
Yeah.
yeah, I got the message because when you get that message, you know, that's what I mean. It's not always a comfortable message when you're
Yeah.
yeah, that you
Yeah.
hear. Yeah.
And how were I want to say the manifestations of the repression for you? Maybe on an emotion, physical, maybe mental level. How did they manifest for you?
The repression piece, the anger repression,
Yes.
that's that's the part of my personality that has always had like inertia at the center of it. It's what I call inertia. Like
Mm.
I'm a 9 on the Enneagram. I don't know if you know the Enneagram,
Yeah.
but nines on the Enneagram, we can be kind of slothy is a word and lazy. And not that we're all that way or even addicted to comfort because we're peacemakers, we're
Yeah.
anger repressors.
Yeah.
So that was my archetype. So it manifested that way. I came into spiritual teaching naturally because I was a peacemaker
Yeah.
anyway. And but the anger repression manifested in the peacemaking. That was really what it was. I mean, that was my ego.
Yeah.
My whole life was trying to survive everything that happened to me with my parents and my bullies by making peace and getting away from everyone and stuffing the anger down. So it really manifested as my peacemaking persona. But I mean, if you go back, it manifested as the addiction. I was addicted to drugs and alcohol for many years. It manifested even in some ways as the teacher, because the teacher that I was teaching was ignoring buried emotions. So it
Yeah.
manifested as that, but also mainly manifested. I mean, look at science says it's the root of a lot of suffering. I think it manifested as my chronic pain and my cancer too.
Yeah.
So depends on which route you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Manifesting is,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was, I love that you gave all that context. I was more looking at the physical kind of manifestation because I've had a moment of real deep, it was more like grief, sadness, repression for me, shame, repression, and it showed up as an episode of acute, intense asthma that subside to a great degree after I allowed myself to find my own language with shame and grief and sadness and all of that. Because anger would come so easy to me. It would
Oh,
come
really? Oh,
so easy to
interesting.
me. Yeah.
Okay.
I I was mostly the opposite. I could lose my shit like that.
All
But
right.
if you were, I mean, and it's weird. I had moments of like fracture because as a kid I was the softest crybaby, boy you could have ever imagined.
That's for him.
I don't know, you would bully me, I would cry, you would anything, I would just default to crying.
Yeah.
And of course, growing up in Africa, it was met with a lot of like, you know, kind of backlash, bullying as well. And there was a moment where I learned numbness. And I
Hmm.
can remember that. It was like, nope, this does not affect me. I learned how to fight all this.
Yeah.
And it lasted, I want to say, a solid 12 years, maybe more than probably 20 years until I allowed myself to dive in deep again. So I want to ask you something about the profession you did before you started teaching. I saw you were a lawyer. Because a lawyer is going to for war. It's like, I'm going to fight this
Yeah.
battle to defend the interest of whoever I'm defending. And
Yes.
you mentioned how you were, your anger was repressed. Do you think the profession of the lawyer was a way for you to channel some of the warriorship that you didn't know how to express in other areas of your life?
100%. Yes, absolutely. So insightful, by the way. Yes. Nobody's ever asked me that. 100% because I had that in me, with the buried anger. I had that warrior. I mean, the anger was what I was afraid of when I was a kid is what it
Yeah.
was. Because you add that to the warrior, it's scary, especially when I saw, you know, role models when I was a kid of anger that weren't clean and healthy. So I
Yes.
wanted to stuff that down. But yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. It wasn't safe to be that, to be my full self. So being an attorney, like you put on a suit and they give you this license to go and argue and you get power to go do this and you can, yeah. And it was safe because that's safe compared to like actually being confrontational with anyone close to me. It was
Yeah.
also that way. It was like a way to kind of play it out without, so, fight in the courtroom and not at home
Yes.
in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like some people pick up martial arts to basically begin to to have, I want to say, a container where they get to practice confrontation. For you, I would say it seems like at the very least, being an attorney was a form of like, okay, this is the arena where I will engage the part of me capable of standing for something that is right.
Yes. Yes. That's it gives you a license to also. That's the safe part of it because that's different than me as a person standing up for something. That's what I want to point because I can never
Yeah.
do that. That was so hard for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, put on the suit and you can do it, and I could do it. I could stand up for things.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is there's a profound thirst for maybe justice with it encoded within you, a profound thirst for like doing what is right or what is loving. Um, and I want to have your view of how your younger years and the bullying that you experienced, maybe how that informed it. Because to me, every time I see somebody who has been exposed to unhealthy ways of expressing anger and they choose to repress it, at their core, this is somebody who is devoted to being loving.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'm just curious what in your
Yeah.
childhood eventually informed that perspective.
I mean, I was always a very sensitive kid. So like if you yelled at me, speaking of you getting angry, like if as a kid, if my dad would have yelled at me, I just cowered. I didn't have
Yeah.
that energy of power or anger. Um, so even before I was bullied, I was a timid kid. I was a kid who couldn't stand up for himself. For example, I wouldn't defend myself, and I got love and approval by being loving and empathetic. So it started before the bullying, but
Yeah.
certainly the bullying taught me that almost like be that way to survive. It almost became like that's a survival pattern now. You can't rock the boat. You can't stir up conflict. Be a good boy. You know, and it
Yeah.
became much more of a trauma response. Even though it was always kind of a trauma response that part of me. But yeah, there's a part of justice and right and fairness which is good. It served me well as an attorney. Like fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
All that justice and fairness. That's also part of my pathology too, because with anger repression, it's like you have to be good. It's a
Yeah.
compulsion, deep in the
Yeah.
body, there's this anger and you can't express it. And so you have to go around being good. And so the righteous causes and things like that, I would get attached to those in unhealthy ways too, even
Yeah.
though there was
Yeah.
that. Anyway.
I'm curious, what were the experiences? In the question, I'm aware that I am assuming that you had some, but experiences of I don't know, giving a voice to your quote unquote badness. What I mean by that is sometimes we want so much to be good or to be seen as good.
Mm.
And what I've seen in my own journey is the parts of us, it's like there's this longing for freedom. And I've seen so many people that want to be either the good girl, the nice guy and stuff, go through sometimes destructive episodes, maybe unconscious, where I don't know. They just want to to find a sense of themselves beyond being good.
Yes.
And I wonder if that's what did you. I mean, I'm not gonna say that's what the journey of addiction was, because addiction was, to me, the way I see it is a way to kind of deal with what the body doesn't know how to, I don't know, process.
Hmm.
So I see it more as an adaptation. But did you have some moments of going wild and like almost by
Yes.
design?
Yeah, it's so funny. These are great questions, by the way. They're so tuned in. Um, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you if your audience can handle it. I had a BDSM addiction. I'm gay, and
Yeah,
I had an addiction to that kind of sex, and that happened. My whole audience know that. My followers know this. As a teacher, I came out and talked about this. I had this addiction on the side. This was a long time ago,
yeah,
and that was my wild side. But that too was connected to the same trauma and repression because I was playing out this kind of submissive role in that, and so replaying my trauma. So but that was also my wild part because that's the part that at first I didn't want anyone to see. So that's
yeah,
over here, and this is my bad part. And
yeah,
but I was, was that was fun. I mean, that was sexual. That was like that. I could tell that there was certainly a part of myself being played out there, but I
yeah,
wasn't conscious of what that was until much later. I did trauma work around it, and that compulsion fell away. But yeah, that was, but see, I've always otherwise had to been good on the surface. Like you have to look at things like that, like addiction, where you see that wild bad part. Because at the surface, I always had to appear a certain way with anger repression.
yeah,
Always had to be, I couldn't that part, even to come out as a teacher and tell the people that I was teaching that I had that addiction was
yeah,
difficult. I had to process a lot of that
yeah.
to
Was
share
that
that.
also liberating?
Totally. And since then, so my audience knows basically everything about me, which is just like being in a relationship and being authentic and connected, which is so much better than the way I was teaching before from the anger repression and not letting anyone in
Yeah,
to, who I am.
yeah. That I mean, part I have a million questions that keep forming in my head. I just love your transparency and the way you are able to just bear your heart. I love it so much. Um, the other thing I wanted to ask you, maybe that's a little related to it. Um, how has your relationship with something that I've seen, something that I've seen across the board, especially within me, within the men that I've worked with that have a difficult relationship with their anger, it's somehow it gets tied into their relationship with like masculinity in general, with men in general. And I'm also hearing, I'm also hearing that you're gay. And what that brings up for me is this question where sometimes there's a deep longing for masculinity, and at the same time there is the, I don't know if you've experienced it. I'm really curious. There's also kind of the aversion. It's
Mhm,
like kind of push and pull energy.
mhm.
Um, I've experienced that with my own relationship with anger because I've witnessed very much violent expressions of anger, like the beatings that I've received as a kid and all that. It was MMA. Anyways, I am just wondering if there's anything you want to say to this.
Yeah, which part of it? Because I was thinking about, I want to hear about your history. Now you got me
Oh,
thinking about that.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry.
Which part
Yeah,
of it?
the kind of like the maybe the imprint of the relationship with masculinity that you
Oh,
had,
yeah,
because
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, also for me, it was a relationship with like power in a bigger
yes,
sense because like my bullies, I mean, they were little kids, but they did represent like being a little gay kid, they represented the heterosexual counterpart for me,
mm,
in terms of power. I was gay, and so that reduced my sense of power as a human being just in the culture. And then being an anger repressor, being the kind of kid who couldn't defend himself, the power was an issue. So, power has always been an issue, or masculinity. From the time I was bullied by those boys, And I also then grew up, just like you say, with this love-hate relationship with power. Even my BDSM addiction was my compulsion to own that part of myself, that power,
Yeah.
because the dominant figure that I'm having sex with represents that and
Yeah.
represents the anger that I've buried. So my whole life really is about the struggle with power as an anger
Yeah.
repressor. And so therefore it's a big shadow for me in terms masculinity is one way of saying it. That's usually how it shows up is men, the power of men because of being gay and being a man. But it's also just power itself.
Yeah.
It's not even connected to masculinity because it's an issue of just, when you repress anger, apparently you didn't have to do that for part of your life.
Yeah.
But that's your power. You can't defend yourself. You're just powerless, a feeling of powerlessness that you carry around. So that was why it was an issue.
Oh yeah. I mean, for part of my life, it became clear that survival for me became meant becoming feral. That became really clear for me, because and that's what drew me to martial arts. I was drawn to like powerlifting, stuff like that. I was like, no, 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 I got to become feral unless I'm not gonna make it. It's not gonna stop. Things like that. So I want to extend this conversation to everyone, to everybody listening here, because one thing that I'm seeing and one thing that we are talking about is how many of our tendencies or even compulsions, sexual compulsions, are driven by repressed emotions. What can you say to this if somebody is like witnessing some of their tendencies and compulsions and deep down we all know, we kind of feel like, oh, I'm playing out a pattern here. So I wonder what you can say about that, maybe how power plays into this. I've noticed with my relationship with some women that sometimes I was looking for a specific type, a specific archetype, and I started noticing even the type of sexual partners that I was going for, a lot of my emotional injuries were playing in there.
Totally. I mean, it's in the sex and it's in the love. It's both of it because we're playing out who we are,
Yeah,
obviously in life. And the repression holds back those parts of us that are true for us that we can't show. So then, it just somehow gets involved in all the sex and the love. I have now worked with people and the addiction, for example. I've now worked with people who've gone deep into anger repression. So they started out with like not knowing why they drink wine
yeah,
compulsively or do some sex addiction or something. And then they literally become so conscious that they can see that when they're using, it's the way of getting back at dad, or it's a way of dealing with the anger. They can actually feel the anger. What used to be like a compulsive contraction in the body, they've made it conscious enough to know that this addiction is because of the anger. So it's a
yeah,
really direct seeing, which is nice because usually, because anger is buried, it is hard to see what's the impact here. Is this driving the addiction? But we get to see it all the time. Because we're processing, we specialize in processing repression, so we get to see it, how the connection is, including with relationships. Because I mean, I tell this story all the time. The last partner that I had, who happens to be my best friend today, the reason I was drawn to him was because of the buried anger in me,
mm,
because he was more like, if that's how you are, he could get angry.
yeah,
See, he could have that. That was available to him, which was, he didn't show that to me when we first met because, you don't show that. But that energy was there and I was attracted to that energy. So I
yeah,
actually think that repression is involved in our attractions every day. And in fact, if you think of it from like a shadow quality, like Carl Jung, we're only attracted to ourselves. In fact, some parts of ourselves that we're trying to own in
yeah,
relationship. And that's what I found is that I was often attracted to people who had some quality that I felt that I lacked, and it ended up being a quality that I had, but I had to own it. And I've always used my transformative work in relationship and with addictions because it's all connected.
yeah. I love
Yeah.
that. I love the way you are bringing the fact that actually shadow attractions are part of attractions, and it's just like maybe a natural phenomenon. I see sometimes spiritual seekers who are focused on doing the work so much and focused on wanting to get to a place where there's no more shadow material playing out. And I wonder if that is even a realistic expectation to have on ourselves.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, that's an interesting story around that because, I train people who are going to become helpers. I train
Hmm.
helpers, people. And one thing they want to do is they want to deal with their addictions
Yeah,
because, they feel shame around it. And they feel like if I'm doing this, I haven't worked some issue out. But then when it comes to them quitting, when we go deep into the body, they find that things like wanting to be seen as good and get love and approval is behind that. And if they
yeah,
would actually just process that a little bit, they would see that really their system is taking care of itself
yeah,
right now. They haven't dealt with some issue. And in fact, it's taking care of that addiction. And that if they would open to it more compassionately, they would find a place for it. And they could even bring it into their helping. But there's so much shame around that I think it's a good view that you have. If we can really see it that way, that the addiction, we don't want to have harmful addictions. We want to reduce harm and
yeah,
recover. At the same time, this is our body taking care of us.
yeah,
And we're not even privy to it. The way I see it, we're not even really aware of most of it. It's taking care of us. That's what addictions do. They don't ask our consent, you know,
yeah,
really, they're just taking us over. So when you go deep into that, if you get beyond the shame and you get beyond, I have to quit because I want to be seen a certain way,
yeah,
then you get to the real trauma that drives the addiction. And I think that's how you heal, is you have to kind of get beyond some of that surface stuff anyway, I think,
yeah,
of what
uh,
people think about
yeah.
you or what you think. Yeah.
I love that. There's something that I've been kind of more intensely writing about recently, and I call them the virtuous addictions that drive our suffering. By virtuous addictions, I say being seen as good, for spiritual seekers, being aligned, feeling connected. We want to be in these states sometimes all the time, like express being inspired, addiction to inspiration. It's like we want to be in these states. So, I mean, we want to be there all the time. And because of that, whenever we don't feel like we are there, the spiritual inner critic, the wrath just comes online, the self shaming comes online. And is it something that you've seen in your work as well, where we have new forms of addictions, especially in like for people who are for spiritual seekers, addiction to light, for example.
Mhm. Yes. And, a lot of it is anger repression too, I have to say,
Yeah,
calling my own repression out in spirituality. A lot of it is because that particular repression, is you're holding that back. So you have to be at the surface, drawn to certain things. So there's that, just being drawn to like those principles. But yeah, so much of it is, I just want to say, connected to it, that repression. Every time you bring something up, I keep thinking of people that we train who are seeing the layers behind
yeah,
this and how it's amazing. I hope that more people become aware of it because there's so much opportunity, as you know, when you get to these deep layers to finally discover who we are.
yeah,
That's the hidden gem in this because we spend so much time speaking of addictions and stuff, focusing on that, like, or focusing on getting the perfect spiritual state or whatever, when actually to me, the real beautiful thing is that we get to discover who we really are. And
yeah,
that ends up being something very real, despite our desires to have the perfect state. Like if we stick with it or whatever we're going for, the perfect spiritual state. Because I think a lot of that comes from repression, is what I mean,
yeah,
from trauma.
yeah,
And when you work it out more, yeah, it's about discovering who you really are.
yeah,
That's what I love about this process, because then that ended up being something different than I wanted to be,
yeah,
obviously, letting that unfold the way it is. And that's the beauty to me of seeing that repression has its hands in everything, even the addictions and love. But that just means to me that freedom has its hands in everything. That's what we're doing, is we're seeing that it does affect all these patterns and that you can make change, as you know, by processing.
what I'm hearing, I actually like it. It's like at any point of the journey, the quality of the fuel, let's say what fuels the engine of transformation, it shifts. Maybe at the beginning, you're running on dirty fuel, like diesel mixed with like, I don't know, debris that could be the pain, the trauma, and something. And at some point, you refine your engine, and then the engine start telling you, well, we can't run on that fuel anymore. I need you to give me cleaner fuel. Like it has
Yes.
to move from, instead of trying to run away from pain, it
Yeah.
has to become something else, like give
Yeah.
me cleaner fuel.
Right.
That's kind of what I'm hearing from you at the moment.
I think so too. I think you probably agree too with what I'm about to say, which is the clean field thing reminds me of how suffering is helpful. Even though it
Mm,
sucks to suffer, it really has helped me because we have a lot of ideas, as you know, like what we're supposed to be like you say,
yeah,
like I'm supposed to be spiritual all the time, or I'm supposed to be this way. But thankfully, the suffering has taught me to pay attention to it.
yeah,
It's kept me true and real and authentic, the suffering. That's what I don't know, for some reason that came up when you were sharing that. Because to renew is to pay attention to the suffering because it's not there for no reason.
yeah,
We learn that it's here for a reason, that we actually get our unmet needs met from the suffering because we have an unmet needs inquiry where we say, like, if some suffering is happening, we'll say, what emotional need gets met out of believing that? Or what do I get out of believing that? And we
yeah.
listen to the inner body and we hear that we get something out of all of that. And I don't know where I was going with that other than to say, I don't know where I was going with that, but I
The
wanted you to know
suffering
that.
is
So I could,
helpful,
yeah,
to it's like, it's this kind of initial driving force that causes you to pay attention and to begin to
yeah,
notice, okay, what unmet needs are driving
yeah.
this.
Right.
Yeah,
That's the thank you. Because the unmet needs are so connected to the suffering is what I was saying is that if I don't pay attention to suffering, I don't experience the renewal,
yes,
the renewal of being. So for me, a lot of my path has been stop ignoring suffering. Stop.
yeah,
That's what it is because all the suffering. See, with me, with an anger repressor, I don't know about you, you can tell me, is that we hide our suffering in so many different ways. Like
yeah,
this whole thing about trying to be a good boy, we're
yeah,
hiding our suffering in that. That looks like a good thing that we're trying to do in the world, but we're suffering
yeah,
from it. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's
I
been
mean,
trying to
from
stop them.
it wasn't for me. The experience of that was, oh, I am trying to be this person. I was actually going against needing anybody or anything. Hyper independence became one of my patterns, one of my traits. It's like, you know, I don't need anything, but it was filled with pride as well. It was like, let me just own it. There was a whole lot of pride in there. I don't
Yeah.
need anything. I don't need you. You're
Yeah.
gonna let me down. You cannot be trusted anyways.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Right.
That's how I experienced it as well.
Totally.
Um, so feeling safe in needing has been a big learning for me. Like it is
Mm.
safe for me to need anything, somebody else, support, whatever. That
Needs.
has
Yeah.
been like learning to be again emotionally vulnerable has been a big, 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 huge training for me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I want to almost ask you questions because if you didn't have to repress anger as much as I did, then vulnerability in terms of, it depends on how you define it,
Yeah.
was probably hard for you. That's been part of your journey is that particular vulnerability. I don't know how you define vulnerability because I think we can
Yeah.
define it differently,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Anyway, did you have a question there for me? I was going to start asking you
Oh,
questions.
I mean, I'm receiving the questions. Like there was a lot of yeah, whether I define vulnerability as being in emotional pain, there was a moment where I stopped. I completely stopped doing that in my family of origin, being any kind of emotional pain. It drove a lot of depression at some point, especially late teen years where there was no room for vulnerability, or at least that's what I internalized. You know, looking back, maybe there was some kind of room, but I never went for it anymore. I was just like, nope, it's way more peaceful when I don't even engage, when I don't show what is painful, what hurts. I handled all of my problems myself, after the age of 16, 17. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, I can relate to that. Um, because I have had an avoidant attachment style in relationship, first of all, most of
yeah,
my life. And then even I have to say spirituality, I was going to ask you about that because once I got involved in processing and spirituality, I think that my avoidance got its hands in that and used some of that to like justify my pain and not even look into some of my pain, frankly,
hmm,
ironically, using it for that reason, because I could kind of pull away from people, you know what I mean? Like you kind of just
yeah,
pull away from the whole world, first of all. They're all messed up and they're not processing their stuff. I'm gonna
yeah,
go over here and wake up and heal over here. But when I got here, it was like I was rather isolated from my
yeah,
own avoidance and I wasn't opening up. I didn't have authentic connections around me. And I realized I had to use even my spiritual process, which just makes me human
yeah,
to to avoid.
Yes, absolutely. I use so much again spiritual rationalizations to feed more my avoidance. And so many things I've had so many experiences that kind of forced me to go the other direction. Like right now we have 3 kids. I've been in a relationship for over 11 years now. Like I've had to deconstruct all of that within that relationship so much. And you mentioned something at the beginning, how at the start, our shadows are part of the attraction. And then I keep experiencing the shadow clashes when we come to a place where, okay, all the shadows are out in the open. Are we gonna do the integrative work needed to move forward? And I've realized cyclically in this specific relationship, at least, we experience some new shadow clashes. It's like, oh, I never saw this aspect of you. And
Uh-huh.
she's like, holy shit, I never saw this part of you. It's like,
Uh-huh.
okay, can we sit down and actually troubleshoot and do the work? I mean, yeah, that's I've seen.
You've got a good partner. That's good that you've got that. That's amazing. Because didn't always have that. It's nice to have a partner who's engaged like that, who will talk to you about those things. Like even on a spiritual process, even process it. I don't know if you guys do that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, it's a big part of it. I wanted to ask you, what is your current relationship status with anger?
Oh, with anger, you
Yeah.
know, strangely, I went through a period because I did anger repression work. I really did it. I developed it, and I went through a period of being angry, being able to get angry, and it was just because it came to the surface. I think every anger repressor probably has to deal with that if that's your repression. So I went through that period. But frankly, I don't get angry much, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter, is what it is. It doesn't matter because anger used to be a big deal to me. And whether I'm angry or upset used to be a big deal to me.
Yeah.
So somehow allowing that and integrating it, I feel like the anger repression has given me a surprisingly myself rather than anger. It's given me anger, but what it's given me is like, I didn't understand things like being in a conversation and you feel unheard, but you don't speak up and try
Yes.
to, you know what I mean? And then you blame the other person. They're not hearing me. And then you shut down. Just things like that, where instead of doing that, I would speak up and I would say, hey, you're not hearing me. I just want to make
Yeah.
sure did you hear me? Because that
Yeah.
way I don't have to feel that resentment and then carry that with me, which affects our relationship. So it's been more about that, about needs,
Yes.
like you're saying, like finding what my needs are.
Yeah.
And instead of holding all that back and suffering, you know, sharing it and integrating it. But the first few times I did it, it was like, I'll just tell people unless they've done this work, or unless you've done work like this, you might not know that like if you bring anger to the surface after a lifetime of holding it back, it's like you're angry at everyone for
Yes.
not meeting your needs,
Yeah.
you know? And they didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Frankly, it was something in childhood, but we have to go through that, or at least in this path, we have to go through a period where, you know, we're mad. Where
Yeah.
we've been mad since childhood. That's the whole point. But now it's not that way. It's like because I can express things, and therefore I
Yeah.
don't have to hold the anger back. Yeah.
Yeah. You bring up something that's so important. I feel like most anger repressors, they kind of deep down know it. They feel like they are so angry no one can handle it. And that the world around us is just gonna, I don't know, burn down, or and yet on a deeper level, they kind of know to be free, they will have to go through that initiation. I kind of relate to it as a dam on a river, and when you start taking apart the dam, all the water just explodes and goes everywhere. What would you say to somebody who is going through that phase right now and just like, I am pissed off at everything and everybody right now, and it maybe even becomes destructive and is harming some relationships. What would you say to what can somebody in that position do?
If they're doing our method, I would say continue processing your fear of expressing that emotion,
Yeah.
because what makes it explosive, anger, is still holding it back. Because anger
Yes.
repressors, when they still are, when it's coming up, they don't realize they're still holding it back. And if they could fully allow it, it would integrate more. So if it was this method, I would say keep doing the work. But if
Yeah.
you're out there, I would say, because the work here would entail get to your needs. You're angry
Yes.
or you're hurt because your needs aren't met and you're not expressing it, and try to find a way to find what those are so you can work that
Yeah.
out better.
Oh, I love this so much. So let's say somebody is in this space of dealing with any form of addiction, and just like you expressed, at the core there is a need that maybe is screaming in the shadow, that a need that is feeling invisible, that the addiction has been meeting to a certain extent, but not in a supportive way necessarily, not in a kind of healthy way. What can somebody in that position, or maybe a few beginning stages, steps, a few beginning inquiries that somebody can start just doing to maybe take the edge off so that the addiction does not possess them as much?
Yeah. Um, One thing you can do that's pretty accessible is like we call it reverse inquiry. So if you
Mm,
pull something up and like if you go into your mind and you imagine an addictive substance or activity, you kind of close your eyes and you connect with your body while you're with it. You can say reverse inquiry is where we say the opposite of what's true for us.
yeah,
So if we want that, we might say, I don't want that, and just drop that in the system. And because that image is there of that addiction, the body responds, yes, I do. But if you
yeah,
really allow it all, just sit and allow all the thoughts that say you have to have it and the energy that comes up with it. If you sit with that, see what happens, because you're really, really allowing something that before you might not have allowed that. You would have just done the compulsion,
yeah,
from very unconscious, trying to
yeah.
even hold it back or trying. But if you just sit there and allow it, see what happens. That's something people can do to become more mindful and aware of cravings too.
Yeah, which is to just basically what I'm hearing you say is if they give themselves permission to be with, to not just take action on the craving, but to just be with the sensations of like what it's like to crave, to be with the craving,
Yeah.
that can maybe expand, give them more agency in the moment. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Because if you like, when I owned addiction treatment centers, we used to have people become mindful of the thoughts and feelings that are behind the craving. So they might have an image of smoking a cigarette and then
Yeah,
some sensation, some other thoughts. But what happens if they just witness and allow it all? They don't try to change or do anything with it. They just witness and allow the energy, including the energy. But then we'll go over to shame and do the same thing because there's shame if they use often. So
yes,
we wouldn't just say like, okay, I can have that and then rest and allow everything. You might say, I don't have to stop using that because the shame can come up then. It's like, I have to stop. I can't do that. That's bad for me.
yeah,
All that stuff comes up. So it's just about allowing and accepting the two sides of the coin. One is craving,
yes.
and the other one is the aversion, the shame based aversion.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing you say is almost a form of holistic release. It's like they are trying to keep themselves so hard on one side of the polarity, which is no, this is not allowed. And if you allow it, therefore you're a piece of shit or
Yeah.
whatever kind of like self-destructive language that they hold there. And what you're saying is, well, actually allow yourself to feel the longing. Just be with it. You don't need to do anything with it, but just be with it. And
Right.
you're kind of like pushing the envelope a little bit. It's like, I don't have to stop being addicted to it. Anybody who
Yeah.
is dealing with an addiction will
Right.
hear this right now and be
Exactly.
like, what the hell? Are you crazy? Like,
Yeah.
you basically kind of not just condoning, but pushing me in the direction of it.
Yeah.
So it can sound so counterintuitive, and for me it resonates so much because doing bringing people into the shadows sometimes. One thing that I've, especially with people who sometimes come see me, they're like, there's this purpose, there's this light, there's this gift that I want to express in the world, and I just want it. I don't know why I can't, blah blah blah. I keep sabotaging myself, and I usually take them in a direction. What if you never express your purpose in this lifetime?
Right.
And you didn't have to fight it, to fight that thought. What if you didn't and sometimes there's like a weird relief that they experience, and they have a
Yeah.
hard time explaining why they feel relief. And sometimes they would say, when we go in there, they would say, then I can just breathe, then I can just like enjoy being here. So I wonder what you have to say with, because I feel like it's maybe similar in procedure, where it's like, what would it look like if I stopped fighting or shaming myself for the longing or for
Yes.
the craving.
Okay, so that's a piece of it here because we do that kind of work here. But see, what I wanted to say is if you came and did KI, we would get to the anger or hurt or sadness repression that science says is creating it. And that goes much
Yes.
deeper because you can allow the craving and the shame at the surface, but what if you allowed your entire being, your authentic
Yes.
self? See, and therefore, if you process the buried stuff, you're actually more allowing of your entire being, even the parts of yourself that are addicted. You're much more like what I noticed with some of my addictions through the years is the shame left first so that I
Yes.
could actually deal with the issue because the shame was a bit distracting. It was trying to make me turn that into an identity and
Yeah.
so the shame left. And then I could focus on what I was going to say is I could focus on the anger repression under the addiction, which I couldn't give you that skill here today because that's
Yeah.
our skill.
Yeah.
But we start with acceptance, like allow the craving, allow, like you say, allow the shame because I mean, I base that on the science that says suppression and repression create our suffering. Repression creates addiction. To repress the craving itself is suppression. And
Yes.
there's also research around anxiety is worse if you repress it or suppress it. Depression gets worse if you suppress it. I went into this deep sort of analysis around it myself because I had treatment centers. Like, is it healthy? There are there are plenty of studies that talk about mindfulness
Yes.
and how it helps cravings and stuff to allow, what I'm saying is to allow both the craving and the shame. My caveat, Xavier, is this, is that we wouldn't do it that way in this method. We would go to the anger repression for
Yeah.
what we think would be a deeper embodiment. But yeah, to allow the craving and the shame, it's just self-acceptance. So you're
Yeah.
not against these parts of yourself.
Yeah.
That's the one thing is to try to be against something that it's just natural for us though. Like here's this addiction. Now I have to be against it to get rid of it being at war with it, I think we question that whole premise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like the war on drugs has exploded into more drugs usage collectively.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so, how much pushback this paradigm of working with or impulses and cravings and addictions, how much have you experienced or have you experienced any pushback at all from bringing this way of working with it forward?
Xavier, I have stories to tell you. Dan could tell you too, because we used to be in the mental health and addiction treatment field. And our greatest resistance wasn't to this. Were okay with this. Our greatest resistance was to the repression work among therapists and helpers who didn't want to look at their
Yes.
own buried anger. There's a whole story there. But that's our resistance that we encountered. But so because I think most people, when they're mindful and they allow their cravings and their shame and they see the cravings and shame go down, they verify for themselves that that's a healthy way of just allowing things. So that wasn't hard to sell. But what's hard is to say, people, are you ready to get to the anger that's buried under all of that or the
Yes.
hurt? And I think for that, some people are like, no, I'll just stick with the being mindful of the cravings here,
Yeah. It's like, just
because
give me
that's
a little bit of relief. I want to go for relief. I don't want to go for liberation type
right,
energy.
right.
Yeah. And
Which is how the addiction works. I have to say that because
yes.
that's how addiction is like trying to get relief, right?
Yeah. So it's like now then the mindfulness practice, the nervous system regulation practice, or the cold plunge becomes the new object of addiction rather than like the deeper resolution. Is it something that you've seen?
Yeah, Scott, I could tell you stories of people who that became their whole issue is managing the addiction or managing the suffering. And what we learned how to do is to go to unmet needs inquiry to show them how they were getting their needs met that way, of like not coping that way instead of dealing with the real relationship issues that were behind all that.
Yeah.
Like the needs that weren't met over here in relationships. So we do that. We go to relationship because we think that's where it's all relationship. And that's the reason we're
Yes.
using. It's because we can't feel and express what's true. We don't have boundaries. So it always goes there for us to relationship.
Yeah. Would you say that for most facilitators or for most, I mean, facilitators of healing or healing professionals, it is important for them to look at their own repression? I'm going to take an example. Maybe in my own case, a lot of my devotion to the work I'm doing now, I've had to see backwards that it was a response to the repression that I saw in my own parents. Where I'm going with that is, um, let me put it this, maybe it's not really in line with the question, but I started realizing that my desire to help people feeling so free within themselves is because I witnessed my parents, they had desires, dreams, ambitions that were hindered by their own fears or by the fact that they didn't see a path for that. My dad wanted to be a musician, an athlete, and all of that. And he spent his whole life feeling sad because he couldn't pursue that. And I could feel and breathe the sadness, especially when we would find his old mixtapes and play some of them. And yeah, he settled for working in the library of a university for his entire life. My mom, same thing. You know, she wanted to be I don't know, she was passionate about journalism and all of these different things, which she never did, but instead she settled for being a French teacher. But I could just tell that, you know, they had these fears or I don't know, disillusionments that prevented them from pursuing what they really wanted. And it's somebody asked me a question. I was like, are you so passionate about supporting people in freeing themselves from, you know, shadow material and all of that so that they can express their purpose and passion as a way, well, like to resolve, you know, to basically support your parents, which is something you couldn't do as a child. And I had to work on cleaning that, you know, because yes, some of the drive was coming from it. And I mean, it's not wrong. I don't see it as wrong at the moment. But what I'm asking you is, do you see that in many facilitators, especially the people you train, that it's so important for them as well to resolve their own repressions or to have a healthier relationship with that so that they can support people more efficiently?
Yes, I'll tell you this much too, is that we focus on repression, obviously. So we attract a lot of helpers, and a lot of those helpers have buried anger, like me.
Yeah.
So what we find out is it's shocking, and they're shocked to find out because we're going to that level, and you know it because you do that work, is that when we're people who were had to store anger from childhood, not only are we angry at our parents because of all that, and we can't feel and express it, but now we're out helping people. And what's driving a lot of the trying to get our needs met is the buried anger. The
Yes.
buried anger is driving it. So it's directly connected. I mean, it literally is. Like when we see it here. And so people get to this place where it's like they sign up for training and they're so gung ho to help people. And then they start doing the process and they see, oh, shoot, I'm really angry. And I transfer it over even to my clients. And that's another thing. They can see their own anger at their clients, which is good because that's where their neediness comes from.
Hmm.
Like they're needing love and approval from the clients, the people they're working with, just like mom and dad. They're trying to get their needs worked out. So they have to go through that part of the training process where they make conscious those needs in their relationship with the people that they're helping or just as a helper to see how much is coming from I'm angry or hurt by mom and dad, and I didn't get my needs met, and I'm trying to work it out with these clients. And
Yes.
then, which is good though, because by the time they're certified, you've got a really transparent, authentic person who does their own work and who can help people because they've
Yeah.
been that honest about it.
Yeah. I wonder, in your own view, why out of all the emotions on the emotional range, and you know, out of all the difficult emotions that we go through, you know, shame, sadness, and all of these different things, why anger is so central in your view?
It's such a powerful emotion. It can be. I mean, I don't know how you experience it. You can tell me it's like
Hmm.
chocolate. How do you experience vanilla? You can tell me how you experience anger. But when I was a kid, I experienced anger as the scary emotion, because it was always directed at me and I never could express it. So I seemed like I always attracted aggression or something in the shadow aspect of life. So I don't know. It was always scary for me, disproportionately so, because I didn't
Yeah.
understand healthy, clean anger or boundaries. So it was always very scary, but it's not anymore to me. I think that toxic anger or anger where you're not looking at what it's coming from can be definitely, but I just I see it differently. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Is it, when you look at, I don't know. Here's one of my theories on this is
Hmm.
in order for us to be as civilized, we had to sort of just hold back a bunch of anger as
Yeah.
humans and try to get along with each other. But maybe we didn't understand the life force that we were holding back is really, really powerful life force. And then what we needed to do was to learn how to channel it and not be so scared of it. But I think it's the life force. I mean, anger is a force.
Yeah.
And and well, people who repress anger, you can feel that they repress themselves. Their whole persona is often held back. So something about anger is connected to authenticity, to power
Yeah.
also, and people are afraid of expressing that because we don't have those safe places when we're kids where we can just be powerful, but it's safe, or other people can be powerful,
Yeah.
but it's safe. And so it becomes a big deal, I think, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, I agree so much with that because when I see anger a lot as the I don't know why the car analogy comes up for me a lot when I think about anger. It's like the spark plug, there's this initial spark that will start the whole engine, the whole combustion system, and therefore this fire, because anger has a little bit of this fiery component that
Yeah.
now begins to, I don't know, get the engine to properly function. Without it, a car goes nowhere. It's kind of
Yeah.
frozen. Like
Yeah.
I really relate to it as primal energy that we are just learning how to kind of harness to a certain degree.
It is. Very well
Yeah,
said. Yeah.
yeah. So I am wondering, what is your, when I dove into your work and the things that you do, there's a relationship with shame that is so pivotal to the recovery, where we need to learn how to suspend the shame or transcend the shame, or you know develop within ourselves deeper self-compassion. Do you often experience in your line of work some facilitators, for instance, shaming shame as a way to get each other to stop using shame? Or because sometimes I feel like even compassion for the critic is needed to sometimes to have the voice of the critic maybe step back to a certain degree. And uh here's something that I've seen. Where is this question coming from? I see a lot of people out there who are advocates of nonviolent communication that can become violent when they against violent communication. And I'm
Uh-huh.
just like, what are we talking about? It's kind of the same energy that you are using,
Uh-huh.
in reverse type thing. So I wonder if you've sometimes witnessed it, and what does a really healthy relationship with shame looks like?
Mm.
Oh
That's a
yeah.
good question. Nobody's ever asked that question. A good, healthy relationship with shame. Um, that's such a good question. I feel like a lot of shame goes away when you deal with emotional repression. There's a certain
Mm,
amount of shame that is there collectively because it kind of keeps us in line. It's like don't do certain things. It's unfortunate. It's how it is. It's like there are certain sexual rules. You don't do this. You don't do that. And if you do that, you're bad. And
yeah,
collectively, we keep those in place until we're more conscious and we just know you don't harm people.
yeah,
Until then, we have to have shame to kind of keep us from doing certain things. You know that how that is sexual stuff.
yeah.
But a healthy relationship for me has been to see, because I bypassed, I'm the teacher in the non-dual world, kind of known for catching my bypass. And the part of my bypass was that during the BDSM shame-based sex stuff, I was stuck there and I couldn't have a healthy relationship with shame.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really reliving and re-traumatizing myself with the addiction, feeling bad about myself and feeling ashamed. But eventually I learned, Xavier, that for me, and I found research on this, that the shame protects us from repressed emotions. So once
Mm,
I dealt with the buried anger, a lot of shame just went away. I realized it was there to protect me. Um, because I couldn't have boundaries. I couldn't express myself. I couldn't have power. So if anybody were to see me, I would cower and disconnect in shame. And that protected me from just getting angry at them or saying, leave me alone, or this is my. And so I've had to have a reorient myself to myself, really, because these parts of myself that I was ashamed of, they were held back because of the anger repression.
yeah,
And once I dealt with the anger, I didn't have to hold those parts back. I didn't have to like be so ashamed of my sexuality and my expression, no matter what people thought about it. That's where I think a good healthy relationship with shame is if we can find our authenticity somehow in that, because shame is like a trash can in a way for all of our inauthenticity, the stuff that we don't like about ourselves. To
yeah,
me, that's the place to explore
yeah,
the trash can, because
yeah.
with the trash can, you can have a good relationship with shame in that it can be transformative, I think. Because
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about shame, but like for me, it's not an emotion that I would share in relationship. If we were friends, if I felt shame, I probably wouldn't share. I don't know if I would,
Yeah.
but if I
Yeah.
could use it to transform to be more authentic with you and not let the shame hold me back with you,
Yeah.
that's how I would want to.
Yeah. I mean, my default in relationships for the longest time was if something makes me feel ashamed, I will clean up my act, ideal, hopefully without the person being able to notice.
Yeah.
It's like I'll try to clean up my act, you know, and with sometimes without trying to admit to the shame, but I'll feel the shame and I feel inadequate. I feel like I let you down. I feel like I let myself down. Sometimes the inner critical rage. And I'll look for, okay, what can I do to make amends? And I'll go towards that. Especially when it involved me shifting something without it's like admitting shame for me has been a lot harder than like correcting behavior. It's like I would default to correct behavior. It's like, oh, I see something that I've done that was actually really, that wasn't good. That was bad. That was maybe not standing on solid moral ground. I like, okay, let me just kind of shift behavior. And admitting to the shame was something that I'm, even to this day, learning how to do, to admit to the fact that, hey, I showed up in a way that was not appropriate. It's hard. It's still hard to this day. Um, so what do you say to somebody in the context of recovery? Because relapses are part of the journey. And let's say somebody is relapsing more than they like, maybe several times a day, relapsing. I'm wondering what unconditional love looks like in the context of recovery when there are relapses to deal with, and shame reemerges.
That's a great question. Because see, we have our own modality, so we treat addiction a certain way here. So when you ask a question, I'll be like, "Well, this is how I would do it,"
Yeah.
because we have a certain modality. Um, Let me make
I mean,
sure I
my
answer.
hope is that
Yeah,
at the end of this conversation, many people listening to this that have looked for a way to emerge from addiction can can
yeah,
really explore deeper your work because I really feel like
yeah,
it can be pivotal for many people listening to this.
yeah. I hope so. What's your question again, so I can answer it though? Can you remember what it
Okay,
was?
let me say it's like in the context of like recovery, especially dealing with relapses
Yes.
and shame, what would it look like to, unconditional love? What does unconditional love look like in this context?
Okay, that's a good question. Because with our modality, we would say that if the shame is coming to cover up the buried hurt, then
Yeah,
unconditional love would be processing this hurt that you're afraid of and loving that, like working with the fear of this feeling of hurt that's underlying it. And then with the addictions, what most people do is they might try to quit something, but they might reduce harm to something else because they know that the harmful thing isn't them not loving themselves and they don't need the harmful thing to keep this emotion down. They can do a less harmful thing, not heroin, marijuana, not heroin, methadone, not heroin, porn, something like
yeah,
that, just to reduce harm. And then there's less shame in harm reducing addictions, which helps. And then you can get to what we would say, love yourself, right? But how do you do that if you don't love
yes,
these parts that are varied?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we would focus there.
Would you say that one person can trust that they've come a long way in their journey of dealing with repression or addiction if they've developed a genuine love relationship for the inner addict?
Say that again. I like that question. I want to make sure I
Would
answer.
you say that one person can tell that they've come a long way on their journey of, working with addiction or healing emotional repression if they've developed a solid loving relationship with the inner addict?
Yes, because see, I think that the inner addict is this part of ourself that we really have disowned, this part that's
Yeah.
kind of taking care of us. So if we can have an inner relationship with that that's more conscious and definitely more conscious and more compassionate, I think people just do better. Actually, they're just
Yeah.
doing better in that. Because, I've seen, if you have too, the inner violence and shame of addiction. So if you can reorient yourself, because it's a healing process, as you probably know, like people want to quit addictions right away, but that also can send the signal to your system, suffer more. It shocks your system. So a
Yeah.
lot of the healing is like gradually kind of letting go of things until we feel safe enough, to let go of things. So I don't know, that is in and of itself is loving. You almost have to have a certain orientation to that inner addict to do that, because the inner addict might want to just quit and get love and approval and,
Yeah.
or go use and isolate. But when we're more conscious, we have a different relationship with that, I think, hopefully.
Yeah. I love it. I love it so much. I wonder what is your current relationship with power? Because um, y- from the imprint that you had in childhood, it's like power was so intertwined to maybe explosive expressions of anger or maybe unhealthy expressions of anger. And, you worked on like cleaning your relationship with anger. Um, what makes me ask the question is, from my experience, the more you become skillful at helping people, they inevitably put you in a position of power in the dynamics and almost wanting to put you on a pedestal. So there's an inevitable kind of like transference of power that happens. And I wonder how you've allowed, first, maybe even before we talk about the transferences of power and how you work with that, maybe how you work with being put on a pedestal. What would you say is your current relationship with power, your ability to express it, feeling powerful? Yeah.
I've had some interesting relationships around power in professional and otherwise with
Yeah.
different personalities. Like, people do power differently, as you know. Some people
Yes.
wear it right on their sleeve and some people don't. But for me, it's been like when I was bullied, I didn't understand the power of defending yourself because I couldn't. So there's a power just in being able to defend yourself at a baseline level. And so then there's just the power of being yourself, the power of feeling, expressing what's true, of a no is a no, because you
Yeah.
know that's how you feel. That's powerful. Or a yes is a yes, to know yourself like that. Because I only knew power as aggressive and
Yeah.
mean. And so I had to rediscover what it's like to defend myself, to know myself, to say no, to have agency over my experience, conscious agency over my experience. That's what power has been for me. And yeah, there's probably a lot more to say about it. But I was going to mention something else, is because you mentioned when people give their power to us as healers or
Yes.
teachers. Um, we have a term for that here. We call it datafying. Me and Dan get datified, 'cause right, because we deal with varied anger, and the powerlessness coming from people is often from that. Like, they couldn't question dad, they
Yes.
couldn't get angry at dad, and now they're working with me, and I'm teaching them this modality. So here they're looking at me like dad, and then they give me all that power. But what's great about this work is that we can get to the buried anger in them, or hurt, that
Yeah.
does that, and so we don't just ignore it. We in fact, if this work, we deal with it from the very beginning. Well, I'll even say, look, you don't hate me yet. You're not angry at me yet,
Yeah.
but you will be, because you're angry at your dad, and
Yeah.
it's going to happen. So if you talk about it and then you give them skills to process it, then it's not a big a deal. But it is if you don't talk about it, because it
Yeah.
just plays itself out, right?
Yes. Yeah. I love that so much. So it kind of cleans up the space that you are. I mean, the relational container with the person or with the client, where it's cleaner from. It's like we can see the projections. Almost you telling them there's gonna be projections, and let's just create this space so that we can clean it. Basically, we give this relationships an outlet to clear the projection so that you and I can go back to, a heart to heart relationship rather than like you playing out patterns with me, which
Right.
wouldn't be supportive of the transformation you're looking for.
No,
Yeah.
no. It's so interesting because we have to kind of take a certain authority if we're teaching somebody something. There's just the functionality of that.
Yes.
But even if we're clear that, about that, as healers, everybody who comes to us has to deal with that still, even
Yes.
if we're clear. So it's almost like I have to deal with it. Every person that I work with, I have to deal with it anew, freshly.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
person there.
I can so relate. So what has been your um have you had experiences of being seen as a guru, teacher? I mean, it's sometimes people get pedestalized in that sense. And how have you dealt with it?
See, again, I have to refer to my anger repression because I had to be small. So I had
Yeah.
the non-dual realization, but I couldn't be big. And so the pedestalizing was scary, frankly, from that, because I couldn't own that. power, I was shying away from that. But at the same time, I was getting love and approval from it.
Yeah.
you know, so I had to own that too. That kind of thing was feeding that in me that needed love and approval. For me, it's worked itself out through the work because the trauma we're doing trauma work essentially, so we get to work those issues out now in a much better way than we ever did before.
Yeah. I love that. So would you say you are in a space where you are able to receive appreciation more, I mean, more cleanly, more from the heart, where it's like, I want to say, instead of meeting the part of you that felt powerless, instead of receiving it from that place, it is can I don't know if I'm expressing it well. I have a sense that sometimes our longing for approval, appreciation comes from the part of us that has felt insecure or powerless. And there's a difference in receiving it from that place instead of receiving it from a genuine place of appreciating yourself. Have you noticed a difference?
You mean in terms of the who's receiving it in that scenario?
Yeah, in terms of like you receiving the appreciation, let's say appreciation for your work at the moment. It's
Mhm.
like there's a journey, there are distinctive moments in my path where when I would receive appreciation, it would feed my insecure, it would kind of feed the insecure part of me that was like,
Yeah,
oh, this person is seeing my worth that I wasn't able to see myself to a certain degree. And it
yeah,
shifted in its quality when, I built self trust, built self appreciation, self love. And I was like, I was able to receive appreciation from the heart instead of receiving it from my own insecurities. There was just it's
yeah,
almost like I was carrying a hungry ghost that could not be satisfied. But now I'm
yes,
like, I can live on very minimal appreciation.
yes. Well, I had a streak, like before I did repression work with people, I would have a certain pattern, archetype that a person that would come work with me where they would praise me a lot for the
Hmm.
first, they were in avoidance. They were using the praise of me, I now know, to kind of avoid working on some of the issues. But I was getting love and approval and kind of blinded by it. And I wasn't sticking to let's work. And then those relationships all kind of turned bad. There weren't a ton of them, but like I didn't spot that because I was receiving that from that starving place
Hmm.
where, I had to do my own deeper work to see where that was coming from, and because the same people would often who had such wonderful things to say about me would hate me if
Yeah.
their trauma would switch to the other, they would have a transfers to the other direction. So
Yeah.
I had to get behind that. I had to like work on those relationships. And that part of it was how I was receiving that appreciation instead of, I just needed to do some deeper work. That's what I
Yeah.
needed to do. Yeah.
Oh, I like that. I like that answer. Um, so um, there are two things that I want to explore at the moment. You had such a big gap. I don't know how long was it maybe 10 years between the last book you had published and the most recent one.
Yeah.
And it feels like it was more of a pilgrimage to a certain degree. Who is the Scott who emerged from the pilgrimage compared to the Scott who entered, the
Yeah.
pilgrimage?
You mean in terms of just since the non-dual teaching, the books?
Yeah, in terms of you, the man, it's like when you look
Yeah.
at yourself right now, compared to the man who was high on light and high on like, realization, who
Yeah.
was writing a book every year,
Yeah.
and the man who you are today, what do you say are the key differences?
Yeah, I find success I define differently. If I have connected relationships, that's what's sustaining me. And back then, I was still in this world of, with unmet needs where I wasn't grounded in my relationships. That's one thing I want to say because I've had some really good relationships since then. And relationship has taught me more than anything else, as you know it will. And so I didn't have that experience of that embodiment under my belt. And I was just writing those books from a genuine realization, but it's still, I hadn't lived it and embodied it. And I think that's one thing with at least non-dual teachers have to be careful with because the realization could be so profound that you can
Yeah.
jump out there too quick before you know yourself fully. Because
Yes.
we often think if I have a big experience, then that's it. I now have seen myself, but there's so much more
Yeah.
as it unfolds that I'm still learning. I'm still in that process. But I certainly like the person that I am today. Whereas I can't say, I think I was trying to get away from him through the enlightenment, some of that. I've
Yeah.
come back to him, you know.
Yeah. I love that. What what would you say? I've what would you say at this point there's a is a part of you that you're still learning how to love? It's like you don't have yet full, or is there any part of you that you're still learning how to love? One that,
I'm learning.
yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I'm learning how to love the part of me that loves and wants to be connected to people.
Yeah,
Because for my whole life, that was a part that was just basically off limits. I mean, not real connection. So as you know, when you really connect with people, there's a whole nother set of things that happen. Because if you were
yeah,
really avoiding that connection, you didn't get to have those experiences. So I just don't, I think with relationship, you can never say you know yourself fully, because
yes,
the next relationship will show you a whole new set of
yeah.
things, usually.
There's something that comes to mind now that you say this. I call it sometimes the curse of the conscious, or the curse of the awakened, uh, where people that are less devoted to us to a conscious path are, they give less crap to the friction that comes with connection. They just, you're gonna do relationship because that's what you do. You get in a relationship with other people. That's just what you do. That's what we do as human beings.
Hmm.
Not necessarily paying attention to, am I able to fully bring myself here? Am I able to express some things that I couldn't express in other places? Am I really fully connected? Am I really fully present? What I've seen in so many spiritual seekers, teachers, people who are committed to the path of awareness, they are so good at spotting misalignments that every choice must be conscious. It's like, and that can make the journey of relationships a little harder. I don't know if I'm explaining it well. It's
Yeah.
like you start noticing, oh, this person is withdrawing. You just withdrew. Or
Hmm.
I am withdrawing. Why am I withdrawing? What does it, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel it the way I'm feeling it now, but it's just,
Yeah.
it can get more tedious to just open the heart and to embrace an imperfect, I don't know, thing. That relationships are imperfect in nature, and they're also beautiful, but they are tremendously imperfect.
Yes. I think maybe some of this, what I would say is still, we're still trying to avoid pain in that scenario,
Yes.
because a lot of that, you know what I mean by like how repression is, for example, is that we're strategizing to make sure that we avoid pain still. But I think it gets simpler when we're not doing that as much, when we're willing to feel everything and be that imperfect thing. It does get simpler, I think. When I think about some of that, I think of perfectionism too, because I work
Yes.
with anger repressors and how they'll turn it on a spiritual path. It has to, even KI has to be perfect. Our work, they have to do it perfectly. I'm like, no, you should just get to your anger towards dad. That's what we're doing here. It's not about
Yeah.
perfectionism, because that's driving the perfectionism, because they've had a lot of suffering, actually. They've been to different spiritual paths and they've tried to get it right,
Yeah.
and they can't get it right. And that's what I'm saying. Maybe it's not about that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not about getting it right at all. Maybe you have to open to the heart more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
what you bring up has, I know it brings me back to one of the virtuous addictions that I've been writing about. One is the addiction to getting it right. Um, you know, I'm sure there's another side to it, but that's how I see it. It's like we want to get things right so much that it
Or
becomes,
being good. I don't. For me, it
yeah,
was anger. But for me, I have to be the good one in the relate. I can't bring the suffering. I have to be conscious. I have to be good here.
yeah.
That's what mine do. Yeah.
And what has been your relationship with being seen as the villain? Because I assume there are some relationships in your life. Let's even say even professional life. A client comes to work with you, expects some things, and you don't want to give them what they expect because you think it's not really supportive for them, and they get really angry and maybe leave. And in that situation, you are being seen by them as the villain, or any other relationship where you've been seen as the villain.
Oh,
How does your body handle being seen as the villain at the moment?
it used to hate that. That was the thing that I had to avoid. I can't be seen as bad. now it's healthy for me for somebody to have a negative view of me and not try to fix it and just let that be in the world.
Yeah.
And there are people like that for sure.
Yeah.
But because that's the whole thing, I have to be good, and like that's a source of suffering, obviously,
Hmm.
having to constantly think that you're good in the eyes of people. Um, so that, yeah, that's all I have to say about it is that it's nice to have people out there who don't think so highly of me.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's actually a very sobering thought. Yeah,
Yeah.
very humbling thought.
Well, because that
Um,
used to scare me. I used to be a source of suffering that there were people out in the world who thought so, you know,
yeah, absolutely.
so you
I want
can't
to ask,
change it. People are going to feel that way. You can't change it. So at least have a different relationship with it. That's what I say.
yeah, yeah. I want to ask you something else. Maybe, unless there's another question that comes, um, more spontaneously, this could be how we conclude our conversation today. Um, I've written this book that's called Scars of Gold, and just like so much of our initial wounding can put us on the path where we find the gifts that we are meant to express out here. And I want to ask you, is there any wound, a sacred wound, that turned out to become a scar of gold for you, um, in your journey when you're thinking back?
If I understand that term right, I think I had nerve pain, chronic nerve pain for 25 years, and it was holding a lot of my fear of my
Yeah,
authenticity. That ended up being my whole spine ended up being first, I thought it was going to disable me for the rest of my life. My doctors told me it ended up being the source of good, like freedom. And so
hmm,
it's definitely a scar of gold, if that's what you mean by that.
yeah,
And that I think that's true of everything, not to be a cliche, but like even when I was really addicted at my rock bottom, that also people will say that catapulted me into a transformation. So yeah, scars of gold are all over the place. I think
yeah,
we need our suffering to find our freedom. So it's like that's what those that's what's there for.
yeah.
It's either you suffer or you turn it into a scar of gold. But how do you define a scar of gold? Can I ask, Mr. Author? How do you
How I
define that?
define a scar of gold. I think there are some wounds that they don't want to merely heal. Think there are some wounds that want to take you on a journey. It's like they
That's
have a
that one.
voice of their
Yeah,
own.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's that one.
They're gonna take you on an a journey of initiation. They are not responding to Advil or to all the painkillers. They are
Yes.
refusing. It feels like they do have them. That's how I relate to that. Like there are some specific wounds, they're not just like a cut on your skin, they are like a fracture in the psyche, and they carry wisdom, and they will not get resolved if you
Boom.
don't follow their path. And these are the ones that I think become scars of gold, because through that you reclaim a gift, basically.
100%. That's really good now that you define that. Um, because I think that's what we're doing at KI is taking these things that are really stubborn, like my chronic pain,
Yeah,
which that's what I mean by suffering as our teacher. That's how I say scar of gold,
yeah,
because despite all my efforts to process it, allow it, be okay with it, the pain, it ended up just taking me on this wild ride
yes,
because it carried everything that I needed to look at basically
yeah,
inside of
yeah.
it. Yeah.
I love that. Is there anything else that you think we haven't touched enough that we could expand more around, that you would love to touch on, Scott, as we are kind of
No, just think
winding
about
down?
having me back because I don't get invited to podcasts like this much. And I like talking about this. Invite me back. I can't think of anything else today.
Yeah. I
Uh,
love that. I love that. And also, yeah, where can people, where can people lean into your work? To anybody who listened to this, I want to say first, I haven't seen anything else, you know, that will help you resolve impulses, cravings, addictions more than like really inquiring and leaning in there. And when I saw the work you do, I was like, yeah, I would love to have a conversation about this. So if anything that Scott shared really compels you, I would encourage you to dive into Scott's universe. So yeah. So
yeah.
how can people dive into your universe, Scott?
Thank you. Um, so we have repressiontest.com is a somatic test where you can just go, it's free. and you learn which emotions you repress the most. And then we send you a free tool so you can actually do this work for free, get started. It's
Mhm.
repression work. So you want to learn it and see if you can begin to safely dissolve. You can do it on your own and then maybe come to work with us or join a group. But it's free. If you go to repressiontest.com, people could start it right now today if they wanted.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Mr. Scott Kiloby, it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. Thank you for your transparency, your open heart. Thank you for your work, and thank you for accepting the invitation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.